The Key to the Indian by Lynne Reid Banks. Chapter 2, The Wrong Shape. Of course we're not really going camping, Dad. Omri had managed to get his dad to himself by following him out to his studio across the lane. His father was putting the finishing touches on a large painting of a rooster. He was very into roosters since they moved to the country. But they got weirder and weirder. This latest one looked more like an armful of colored rags that had been flung into the air, but Omri liked it somehow. It was like the essence of a rooster, all flurry and maleness, rather than the boring, noisy old bird itself. "Well," said his dad, tilting his head to one side and standing back with his palette, "I hadn't planned that we should. I don't think the boys would go for it the way they did. I didn't think the boys would go for it the way they did. Never mind your mother. Really, she is full of surprises." He stepped up to the easel and put a streak of red near the top of the canvas, like a cock's comb while the cock is in flight. "So I've changed my plan. Here's what we'll do. We'll arrange that Guion and you and I will go on a preliminary trip, a sort of dummy run, to Dartmoor to pick out a suitable site, and so on, while Eddie L's away at school. And then we'll do it on a weekend when Guion won't want to come." "Why won't he?" "We'll fix it so he won't." "How?" "Watch the forecasts. Pick a very wet weekend when there's something good on the box. And then?" "And then, my hearty outdoor lad, you and I will go off together, ignoring the weather, and no one will miss us for 2 days. And we'll go back and see what the situation is." Ah, so that was it. A way of getting away from home, just the two of them. "But have you thought about what we'll use to get back in?" "Yes, I've thought." "Well, what? We can hardly carry some wardrobe or chest or something big enough in the back of the car." His father put down the palette carefully on his paint-stained table with all its jam jars full of old brushes and its rows of squashed paint tubes. "It came to me today in the square when I was sleeping. I got a load of vegetables and I couldn't carry them all in one go, so the greengrocer said he'd take the other box out for me in the car. He asked me the registration and I told him. And in it burst in on me like a blinding light." "What, Dad?" "Go and look at it, the number plate." Omri, frowning, left the studio and crossed the path to the open bays, in one of which was parked the family car, a third-hand Ford Contria estate that his father had recently bought when their old one packed up. His eyes went to the number plate, and he stopped in his tracks. The next instant he had turned and raced back, bursting into the studio with his face alight. "Wow, Dad! Wow and treble wow! You're brilliant!" "No, Om, it's magic. It couldn't be coincidence. It means we're meant to go." They went out into the yard together and stood looking marvelingly at the old car. The registration number was C18LB. "C18? That's for 18th century, of course," said Omri's dad softly. "It's a double indicator. I never thought I could believe anything like this, but I know it's true. That's our cupboard, Omri, our time machine." Omri went to bed that night feeling so excited he couldn't sleep. Another adventure with his Indian. The adventure of Jessica Charlotte, his wicked great-aunt, who had actually made the key, had been complicated and thrilling in its way, but it was more like a detective story than a risky adventure. And it had all happened here in his bedroom under the thatch. A lot of it, most of it, had happened in his head while reading the account. Now a real, true adventure was in the offing, and his dad would be part of it. It might be a bit of a problem, though, leaving Guion behind. He was really getting worked up about the camping trip. He kept calling through the thin dividing wall between their two bedrooms, keeping Omri awake more than ever. "I'm going into town tomorrow after school to get a camping mag. They'll have proper ads in them for gear and articles to read and stuff." "It's not true that Mum's the only one who's camped, remember? Eddie L went to Brecon Beacons with his class." Omri pretended to be asleep and didn't answer. "Omri, remember?" "Yeah." "He said it was grizzly," called Guion, with a relish, as if grizzly was good. "Rained the whole time, and he got lost in a bunch of mist and hurt his leg sliding down some rocks, and they had to hunt for him for hours. Our teacher thought he was dead for sure." You still awake? I've heard of lots of hikers and climbers getting lost on Dartmoor. One died of exposure. We better buy some rope and rope ourselves together. We'll need proper climbing boots, knapsacks, sleeping bags, maps, compasses, a stove. His voice finally petered out on the lengthy list of prospective purchases. Omri was nowhere near sleeping. He was actually sitting up. He switched on his flashlight and was making notes. Maps and compasses. Could you get maps of the northeastern United States back in the 18th century? Sleeping bags, knapsacks, and a stove certainly sounded as if they were useful. If only they could take them. He kept imagining himself and his dad in the car. They could put all the stuff they'd need in there. If you were touching a sleeping bag that was wrapped around a bunch of other useful stuff, it would all go back. They'd have to really think hard. It would be no use wanting to pop back from Little Bear's time to get something they'd forgotten. Wait. The car. Omri could see himself and his dad sitting in the front seats of the car, which was parked in some remote spot, with the bundles of stuff they were going to take back in their laps, and his dad had the key, the magic key. How to lock the car? With the windows open, reach through it and stick the key in the door from the outside, or put it in the ignition? Omri suddenly jumped out of bed and went to where the cupboard was standing in the middle of the new shelf. The key was in the lock. He took it out and looked at it. His heart sank. The key was magic, yes. And it was a skeleton key that would fit in a lot of locks, but car keys were different. They were a different shape. They weren't cylindrical, for one thing. They were flat. Omri suddenly knew without any doubt that no way would the magic key slide into either the door lock or the ignition of their car. This wasn't going to work. Yet there was no doubting the signs. The number plate, C18LB, was like a summons. The car was there covered all right. It was just a matter of solving the little key problem. This called for a consultation. Clutching the key tightly, he tiptoed through Guillaume's room to the head of the stairs at the end of the house. This was a Dorset longhouse, not like an Iroquois one, but a special kind they had in this part of England, one room deep with stairs at each end, no corridors. He crept down the narrow wooden stairway, which opened into the last little sitting room at the end, that his parents had designated as a TV-free zone. As he'd hoped, his dad, who didn't like TV much, was sitting there reading. "Dad!" Omri hissed. His father looked up. "Hello, Om, what's up? Can't you sleep? Where's Mum? Watching something ghastly about hospitals?" "Blood everywhere," he added, quoting Guillaume. Omri glided over to him. "I've thought of something ghastlier. Look at this key. Think of the car." His father took it from him and examined it. "Oh, no," he said softly. "See, it's not going to fit." "Of course not. Why didn't I think of that? I was so excited about the number plate." Omri sat beside him on the mini-sofa. "What'll we do?" They sat silently for a long time, thinking. Omri had time to notice that the book his dad was reading was one of his books about Indians. His dad must have gone into his room earlier and taken it from his library. It was a huge tome called Stolen Continents that Omri had bought second-hand. Now it slipped to the floor, and neither of them picked it up. The whole adventure was poised on the edge of being aborted, before it had even begun. "You know, Omri," his father said at last, "there is an answer. There's got to be. The trouble for me is I don't know enough about the whole business to find the solution. I've been thinking. That story of yours, that won the Telecom Prize. That was true, wasn't it? I thought at the time it had an absolute ring of truth. So I know about the first part, but a lot has happened since then. Developments, I think. What you'd better try to do is tell me everything." "Now?" His dad looked at his watch. It was only 10 p.m. "Are you tired? It's school tomorrow." "I couldn't possibly sleep." "Okay, start talking. Keep your voice down." Omri talked for an hour. He told about how he'd brought Little Bear back after a year, just to tell him about his winning story, and found that he'd been wounded in a raid on his village and left to die, and only Bright Stars going out to find him and lug him somehow onto his pony, and then Matron, who'd proved as good as any surgeon, taking the musket balls out of his back, had saved him. He told Patrick's adventure back in 19th century Texas, how he'd met Ruby Lou, a saloon bar hostess, and how they'd saved Moon, Patrick's cowboy, from dying alone in the desert, and how Omri had brought them back just as a cyclone had hit the cow town, and the cyclone had come back with them. He kept remembering things and wanting to go back, off at a tangent. His father, who had a notebook and pencil by his side, while reading Stolen Continents, made notes. When Omri came to the recent part about Jessica Charlotte, he was getting really sleepy. His dad interrupted. "Listen, why don't you just give me the account to read for myself? You get off to bed." So Omri tiptoed upstairs and fetched Jessica Charlotte's notebook. He carried it reverently downstairs and put it in his father's hands, and stood there while he stroked its old leather cover and ran his forefingers around the brass corner bindings. "It's fascinating, almost magic, just holding it," he said. "I can't wait to read this." "Go on, Bub, get some sleep." Just as Omri was starting up the stairs, his dad added, "Don't keep yourself awake, but do Mum's trick." "What's that?" "Mum says that when she's got a problem, she thinks about it last thing before she drops off. She swears her subconscious works on it while she's sleeping, and sometimes in the morning the solution just appears." So Omri did Mum's trick as he lay drifting off to sleep. He thought about the two keys, the cupboard key and the car key. He laid them side by side in his imagination. They were so different that anyone who didn't know what a key was wouldn't have seen a connection between them. It seemed extraordinary even to Omri, who had always taken the function of keys for granted, that something so small could make the difference between being able to open a door or make a car go.